Hello there. This is one of Fritz Peters' stories. It's about 1926. In the natural course of events, since Mr. Gurdjieff was engaged in writing books, it was necessary for him to employ a typist. He did not set about this in any ordinary manner, but he employed with great fanfare a young German woman he had discovered somewhere in his travels. For several days before her arrival, we heard about her. Elaborate preparations were made for her coming, including finding the proper room for her, the acquisition of a typewriter, arrangements for suitable working space, and so on. Gurdjieff praised her attributes to all of us, told us how lucky he had been to find this perfect person for my purposes, and we awaited her arrival with great anticipation. When she did arrive, she was introduced to all of us. A dinner was served in her honor, and the process was very festive. She was given what we call the loyal treatment, and she responded to it wholeheartedly, taking herself as seriously as Gurdjieff seemed to take her. It turned out that her major magnificent accomplishment was that she could type, as Gurdjieff repeatedly told us in complete amazement, without even looking at key on typewriter. No secretary or typist has, I feel sure, ever been accorded such treatment because of her ability to use the touch system. As if to prove to us all that this ability actually existed, the young woman installed herself at a table on the terrace, in full view of all of us, as we came and went to and from work, and remained there, typing merrily all summer long except on rainy days. The clicking of her typewriter resonated in all of our ears. My first contact with her, and in fairness to her I must admit to a strong anti-German prejudice, having grown up on stories of German atrocities during World War I, was one evening when I was doing my own washing in the courtyard in back of the house after work. She did not know me except by sight, and assuming that I was French, tailed to me from a window overlooking the courtyard, asking me in heavily accented French where she could obtain what she called some savon luxe. She managed to convey to me that she needed this to wash her stockings. I said in English, which I knew she understood and spoke much better than French, that I assumed she could buy it at the local épicerie, about half a mile distant. Her response was to toss some coins down to me, and to tell me that she would appreciate my getting her some at once. I picked up the money, went up the stairs, and handed it to her. I said that I thought I should explain to her that there were no errand boys at the Priory, and that no one had so far told me that she was any exception to the general rule that everyone did their own personal work, which included personal shopping. She said, with a charming smile, that she was sure that no one would have any objections to my performing this errand for her, since she was, as perhaps I did not yet realize, engaged on very important work for Mr. Gurdjieff. I explained that I too was engaged on similar work, that I took care of him and his rooms and did my own errands as well. She seemed amazed, and after a moment's reflection said that she would straighten out the matter with Mr. Gurdjieff, that there must be some misunderstanding, at least on my part, concerning her function at the school. I did not have to wait very long for further developments. A coffee summons came from his room only a few minutes later. When I arrived at his room with a coffee, the typist, as I had expected, was sitting with him. I served the coffee, and then Mr. Gurdjieff turned to me with one of his winning smiles. "You know this lady?" he asked. I said that yes, I knew her. He then said that she had spoken to him and that she had asked me to perform an errand for her and that I had refused. I said that it was true and that besides everyone else performed their own errands. He agreed that this was so, but said that he had not had time to instruct her about everything, and that he would appreciate it very much if on this occasion, and as a favour to him, because she was very important to him, I would be kind enough to do what she asked. I was baffled and even angry, but I said of course that I would. She handed me the money and I went to the store and bought her soap. I assumed that, however I might feel, he had good reason for asking me to do the errand for her, and decided that the incident was closed. Perhaps she was actually special in some way that I had not realized. Gurdjieff at least appeared to think she was. I was furious, however, when after I had given her the soap and her change, she gave me a tip, and said that she was sure that I now realized that she had been right in the first place, and that she hoped Mr. Gurdjieff's action had made it clear to me. I smouldered, but managed to hold my tongue. I also managed not to mention it to Mr. Gurdjieff when I saw him, but I continued to smoulder. Several days later, on a weekend, a number of guests arrived. Gurdjieff welcomed them at his usual little table near the lawns, in front of the terrace where the typist was at work. I brought coffee for all of them and served it. He indicated with a gesture that I was not to leave, and then proceeded to tell the assembled guests that he could hardly wait to show them his new marvels, his two wonderful new acquisitions, an electric icebox and a touch typist. He then told me to lead the way to the pantry where the new refrigerator had been installed, and the guests were properly mystified upon being shown an ordinary model Frigidaire which, as Gurdjieff put it, all by self can make ice, even without my help. A true product of the genius of the Western world. This inspection completed, we all went back to the terrace to inspect the second marvel, who also, without my help, and even without looking at keys, was able to type his book. The typist stood up to greet him, but Gurdjieff, without introducing her, told her to sit down. Then, at his command, she typed, without even looking at keys, but gazing triumphantly off into space. Gurdjieff stood among his guests, gazing at her with unbound admiration, speaking of her as another product of the genius of the Western world. I was actually fascinated by the ability to use the touch system on a typewriter, and my own interest and admiration were unfeigned. Gurdjieff suddenly looked in my direction and smiled an enormous, broad smile, as if we shared some huge joke together, and then told me to collect the coffee cups. It was not until much later that evening in his room that he referred to the typist once more. He spoke first of the electric icebox. Only have to put in plug, and instantly box make noise of humming and begin produce ice. He smiled at me again conspiratorially. Is so with German lady. I like plug. I tell type, and she also begin make noise and produce not ice, but book. Wonderful American invention. I almost liked her then, and would have been happy to do her errands from that time on. I could not refrain from saying so, and Gurdjieff nodded at me, looking pleased. When you help typing lady, you help me, like giving oil to machine which keep working. This wonderful thing. Well, this German lady has got her own record of her time at Fontainebleau with Gurdjieff. And it's interesting to me that Fritz Peters reverses his position. When he's told to like the lady, he doesn't, and when he's told to dismiss the lady, then he likes her. Interesting, isn't it? And here's a second story from Freets. The subtler side of Gurdjieff's humour was always complicated and involved. Early that summer, a group of us, for our own amusement, had been exploring the cellars of the main building, and we had come across a tunnel. While we did follow it for almost half a mile, the rats, cobwebs, and mouldy darkness, and the complete darkness, kept us from trying to reach its end. There was a rumour that since the priory had been reputedly built by Louis XIV for Madame de Maintenon, his secret wife, this was an underground passage to the palace of Fontainebleau. Be that as it may, Gurdjieff was greatly interested in our discovery of this tunnel and went to examine it personally. A week or so after this discovery, he told me that he had an important job for me. He talked at some length about the tunnel and then asked me to take a bottle of the ordinary red wine which we drank at meals and bought at that time for about 8 cents a litre, open it, pour out half of it and then refill the bottle by the addition of half a bottle of sparkling Perrier water. I was then to recork the bottle, seal it with sealing wax, cover it with sand and cobwebs, wonderful cobwebs for this purpose in tunnel, and bring it to him when he called for it. I must have looked puzzled, and he went on to explain that 2 very distinguished guests were scheduled to visit him the following week. This wine was being prepared especially for them. He would call me, and when he asked for one of the bottles of the special old wine, I was to bring this bottle with a corkscrew and 2 glasses. He smiled a good deal during these instructions, and I made no comment about them, although I knew that he was up to something, a phrase he often used when he was planning anything. The 2 visitors arrived. They were well known to me. In fact, they were well known by reputation to everyone there, and they elicited the automatic admiration and respect that is generally accorded to famous people, whether actually deserved or not. I ushered the visitors, both women, to Gurdjieff's room, and then retired to my waiting post near the bell. There were 2 bells for me, one in the kitchen and one in my room. When I heard the expected ring, I ran to his room and was told to bring the special old rare wine that we had found during a recent project of excavating the ruins of the original monastery. This colourful exaggeration had a basis in fact. The priory had been in the 12th century a monastery, and there were a few ruins to substantiate this. These ruins, of course, had nothing at all to do with the tunnel from the cellars. The original monastery building had been a completely different location on the property. I brought the wine as I had been instructed with only 2 glasses, the bottle completely covered with dirt, sand and cobwebs, plus a napkin with which to hold it, my personal touch of elegance. Before telling me to open the bottle, he simply told me to wait there for a few minutes. He told them the story of the wine that was about to be served. He began with a long and highly inaccurate account of the founding of the priory in 1900 by some order of monks who, among other things, like all monks, made wine. These monks, very intelligent, monks like this no longer exist on the earth with such intelligence, he continued. Naturally, such monks make also very wonderful wine. He then said with a quick, stern glance at me, as if to silence any possible laughter from me, I have many projects, all very important at Priory. One project this year is excavation of old ruins. He then described at great length the number of people and the great energy involved in this project, and how miraculously we had come across 11 bottles of wine that had been made by those selfsame intelligent monks. Now come problem for me. Who I know worthy to drink such wine? Wine that no longer exists anywhere in the world except here at Priory. This wine too good for me. I already ruined stomach with drinking Armagnac. Then I think of just you ladies who, as if by act of God, plan to visit me. Just most suitable to first taste this wine. I was then ordered to open the bottle. I wrapped it in the napkin, uncorked it, and poured a little of the wine into the 2 glasses. Gurdjieff watched me with great intensity, and when I passed the wine to the 2 ladies, he turned his equally intense attention to them. He appeared to be burning with anticipation, unable to wait for their reaction. The ladies, properly impressed and suiting their reactions to the momentous occasion, lifted their glasses gingerly in his direction and sipped delicately. Gurdjieff was unable to restrain himself. "Tell," he commanded them, "how taste this wine." The ladies, as if overcome, were momentarily unable to speak. At last, one of them, with half-closed eyes, murmured that it was superb, the other adding that she had never tasted anything to compare with it. Puzzled and embarrassed on their account, I started to leave the room, but Gurdjieff stopped me with a firm gesture and indicated that I was to refill their glasses. I stayed with them until they had finished the bottle, with continued appropriate exclamations of rapture and ecstasy. He then told me to take the bottles and glasses to prepare their rooms on the very same floor as his, one room in which Napoleon had slept, the other having been occupied at some point by some king's mistress, and to let him know when the rooms were ready. The rooms, of course, had been ready this morning, but I laid fires in the fireplaces, waited a suitable time, and then returned to his room. He told me to take them to their rooms and then instructed them that they must rest after the experience of having tasted this marvellous wine, and must prepare for the feast of the evening, a great feast which was being prepared especially in their honour. When I saw him later alone, his only mention of the wine-drinking episode was to congratulate me on the appearance of the bottle. I gave him a significant, knowing look, as if to tell him that I had understood what he was doing, and he said rather seriously, but with a faint, mocking smile on his face, "Where you look, I know you already make judgment of these ladies, but remember what I tell before. Necessary look all sides, all directions, before make judgment. You not forget this." Well, I don't know how good my Gurdjieff accent is. I think I start to sound like the Cookie Monster sometimes. Here at the end, Gurdjieff is counselling Fritz to restrain his emotions and look at things from the other side. And in the previous story, it was Fritz doing that. So they balance each other out a bit. When I was reading these stories last week, I felt a bit sad for these women who were looking for hope, and I'm not sure they found it. They found a story, but it would have been better if they had been helped. Everyone is looking for love, hope, help, and it's difficult to find love in this world. I heard once that a very powerful yoga is well-wishing, to wish well of others and of yourself. In fact, if that was your only command to yourself, you'd probably do quite well. I wanted to talk a bit about science again. Why? Well, because if religion is right and if Gurdjieff is right, then science must be wrong. Everything that's in front of us and discussed must be wrong. Is it wrong? Where is it wrong? I walk through the streets and nothing happens to me. There's no existential policeman. God is not breathing down my neck. It looks fine. Is everything actually fine? There are secrets, and there are errors, and they are in plain sight. They're not easy to see. I said once that Gurdjieff's tradition is the tradition of the law of three. It is the tradition of interaction with the beyond. Because new things come from the beyond through the law of three. The male and female interact together, struggle together, and something comes down from above, something from outside, you see. And you should stand back and realize that all of science is meaningless in a certain way, because science deals with what's here rather than in creating the new. People have words to describe new things. They say it's creation, it's mysticism, it's love. But it can be understood, and Gurdjieff did understand it. There is just simply a relationship. It's an alchemical relationship. And the way that relationship needs to work, the fundamental pattern, is that the male and female separate, they deepen their own power, the man becoming more yang, the woman more yin, and then they reintegrate, having purified and strengthened their power, and then they interact with each other, which is a sort of struggle. It's a battle of opposites. Partly trust, partly hate, partly struggle, partly cooperation. Somewhere in the middle there, the light comes through from beyond. to the benefit of this world and of them. So you see that actually to understand the world is alchemical, or it's not straightforward. When I say it's not straightforward, it cannot be understood well with the mechanical mind. Science is like when you scrunch up with tension the mechanical mind, and you kind of get some results. In the same way as if you observe yourself very closely, controlling yourself, you get some results, but this is not really the right way. This is just a sort of beginning effort, but the right way has to involve this sort of vertical, alchemical relationship. Often it involves you having a mixture of taking action and also surrendering. Vertically, you also need to provide both parts. You have to reach for God and then surrender to God, I could say. But yeah, I'm looking at science and the scientific method and so on. What's wrong with it? Well, additionally to what I've already said, analyzing what's in front of you, all the molecules and so on, it's quite a strange thing to do, since the things that we value are love and feelings and family, and they are not represented by these molecules. Another thing is that if you take a cat and you chop it into molecules and you count the molecules, it doesn't really tell you much about the cat, because the cat is a much higher structure, and if you break the structure up, you don't know anything about it. You have to relate to the cat as a cat at the level at which it is arrived at. In the same way as if you take a mountain and you chop it into dust, then you count the dust, it doesn't really tell you much about the mountain. So the mountain as a larger structure has its own history and way and spirit, right? But because scientists don't believe in any of that spirit stuff, they always want to chop things down to the beginning. They want to grind it up in a blender. It's a kind of misery. You'll see ultimately that the thing about science is that it comes from people who don't feel their own identity and don't feel any magic in life. Another thing about science is that they use instruments to measure the world, like a microscope or a ruler or MRI machine. So they're using all these instruments to measure the world. I suppose the idea is that you get rid of human beings who are unreliable, right? We are human beings, so what sense does that make? But anyway, so you get rid of human beings and you measure the world, and the measurement on the machine says it's 24.9. Okay, and who's going to read that? It's got to be a man who actually reads the number off the machine, 24.9. Now the man has to think about it, the man has to make some reasoning and decisions and conclude something and take action. The man cannot be avoided, you see. But scientists are the kind of people who are their mind is so busy that they don't really feel themselves. So it's a question of identity. People can feel themselves when they are doing their being part cadol duty, when they are three-centered, when they are every man, meaning that they can do many different kinds of work, when they are well-wishing, then you feel yourself, and then life comes alive, and then alchemy means something to you. But if you're one of these overly mental people, your energy is so wrapped up in your head that you can't actually feel yourself, meaning feeling yourself in the solar plexus and so on. You can't feel yourself, and then you have a miserable view of life, and you try to justify it by building ever more machines and chopping up ever more cats and cows and dogs, and chop everything to pieces and then count the molecules. It's stupid, isn't it? But on the other side, if you want to take Gurdjieff's approach, which is to try and feel the living vital energy in things and have an alchemical interaction with life at all scales, horizontally and vertically, this opens doors to miracles, to things that are unexpected, Now, if I can make reference to the law of attraction, this idea that you vibrate a high energy and then the world will respond to you in a high energy, this also is a wrong idea, because there's no law of three in it, and there's no real inner understanding. a human being is a deeply fragmented person. There's a lot of inner work to be done, and until that's done, you cannot vibrate with one energy. If you try to, it's like your mind is vibrating, thinking about having a Ferrari, but the rest of your body is vibrating with 500 different vibrations, so life does not respond to you like that. So it's not that the idea is wrong, but in order to get to a place where you're actually emanating one signal, like as Gurdjieff says, an actor has to be, a true actor has to be somebody who can emanate the 7 different colors. Literally, actually emanate, meaning radiate from the body those vibrations until you produce the white light. That is a master actor, you see. And also with the law of attraction, the idea that you radiate a high energy and then the high energy returns. Where's the law of 3 in that? It's not really like that. Because, as Gurdjieff says, life is about the creation through these triads. So it's like you have to create something for life, and as part of that you get a kind of payment in the middle. So you have to create connections and make something new. But if you're just emanating a high vibration and getting a high vibration back, there's nothing really new there. So there's some problems with that idea. Although it has some truth in it. Okay, I'll leave that now anyway. Goodbye.